Welcome back to Story Hustler. I'm Dylan.
And I'm Mike.
Like and subscribe. We're going to dive right into it because we have a lot to talk about. But it is the trial that we have predicted and really seen coming for the last 2.5 years, if not more than that.
Yeah.
It's the trial of the Samuelites, as we have dubbed it. And it's Sam Bateman, the wannabe prophet of the FLDS. His co-defendants, Torrance and LaDell Bistline, their brothers, are on trial right now for a litany of crimes.
Oh my goodness, and all of them involving the sexual abuse and trafficking of children. And bear in mind, Bateman has already copped a plea, and he's going to go away for decades. They're going to sentence him next month. But we have these two men who were really pillars of his cult, two guys that really propped him up. They're on trial for their crimes, and we saw this coming more than 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, and emphasis on propping them up. One brother, LaDell, really fed Sam basically a plethora of women and children, and then Torrance financially subsidized. So in every way, they have helped him.
Yeah, there are three men that are really the focus of this trial. We're going to get into the weeds here, and we don't want to get too deep. But Torrance LaDell and this man named Moroni Johnson. And Sam, when he started his little cult thing, his little prophet thing, he really just pillaged the families of LaDell Bistline and this man Moroni Johnson, and to the extent these men allowed it to happen, and is really part of the story. But we're in the trial now. Yesterday Monday, jury selection.
Yeah, jury selection, and there was approximately like 70 people they started with. None from Phoenix. None live in the Phoenix area. They were from like Flagstaff or Kingman, or some people from New Mexico.
Well, the one actually was from New Mexico. They said, you're not even from the state, but a lot from the Navajo Nation. The judge ruled that there has been enough media that they said they were going to get the jury pool from outside the metro area. So some of these poor folks have come into the valley from a long way off.
Yeah, so they obviously went through questionnaires and whittled it down, and we got 15 jurors. We have 6 men and 9 women on the jury.
Yeah, and just the things they asked, the things that were interesting, they asked the jurors, just main topics: feelings on child sex abuse and trafficking, feelings about the media, feelings about FLDS and LDS, the practice of polygamy and plural marriage. Wanted to know their feelings about it. Feelings about children testifying. Do you go in with assumptions that if children have been abused, they're going to act a certain way?
You expect them to act a certain way.
And how you feel about their testifying.
Yep.
These are questions they wanted to know of the jurors. They wanted to know their feelings about scientific and forensic evidence, and their feelings about law enforcement.
Yeah, it was definitely extensive. It was 65 questions, I think they said, that they had to go through, and then they went through them again, the answers in court, and kind of asked follow-up questions if there was anything
whittling down people
slowly but surely. And they got to 15 jurors. There's 12 main jurors and 3 alternates.
Yep.
So then after the jury selection, which took most of the day, we got into opening statements. And
fascinating.
Yeah, it really was. So there was 3 opening statements, which is a little bit different in this court because there's 2 co-defendants, the brothers LaDell and Torrance, and they both have separate defense. And then there's the U.S. government that is the prosecutor in this.
Exactly.
So the prosecutor went first, and they really had a strong opening statement. Like, not even because I agree with everything they said, but just like, if you're going to look at the length of time that each opening statement was, and you're going to base it just off of the length of time, the
was about 5 times longer for the prosecution.
It got shorter with each opening statement.
Yeah,
and they really had a good story, a good solid story that was a good synopsis, but didn't get into everything, but got into enough to show how depraved this period of time was and Sam was.
Exactly. And bear in mind, these guys have a royal flush of a hand. You couldn't, the government really, with all the evidence, couldn't have a stronger hand.
In our opinion, obviously.
Well, we know much of the evidence, and we've heard much of it.
We hope.
Yeah. Well, this is true. Again, this is, I guess, just 2 people's opinions on this.
Yeah.
But we have been afforded a very unusual perspective of this story ever since Sam came down and insisted on that meeting with me, and I began trying to get law enforcement and the FBI.
And even before that, you have to understand the context where Sam falls into Warren Jeffs and the FLDS and the overall history of this.
It helps to know the history.
It's just, you kind of have to know how law enforcement has or has not most of the time responded.
So anyway, we're going to have a lot more on that to come. But so anyhow, they impaneled the jury, and they're now doing their
opening statements. And like I said, the prosecutors have laid out a really good story. Solid
they told
evidence.
The story with the timeline and
beginning, middle, and end, and wrapped it up nicely. And then Torrance's defense got up and spoke next.
Yes.
And I just don't feel like they have a case. Just based off, I don't know. I just don't know like what they're gonna say. Like it wasn't super.
It was not a great opening statement. No. Neither of them were. And again, the defense counsels, where the state has a really strong hand, they have a terrible hand going in with these two guys and all the evidence against them.
It's hard.
But there was just I thought. I mean, I spoke to the defense counsel that presented yesterday in behalf of Torrance and got on a phone call, so they wanted to know some history about this. And there just doesn't seem to be any kind of sense of history or telling a story that is anyway going to help their two clients.
No.
Either of the defense teams.
And like we've said, how do you? There's just a mountain of evidence that seems to be pointing at them.
Yes. But, I just
it was
you want to say you these are tough cases. You want defense lawyers who are going to step up to the moment, and maybe there's just not enough here for them to work with.
No, but she had the second longest opening statement.
Yes.
And then LaDell's defense finally had their opening statement, and it was by far the shortest. And just to reference my note to make sure I know, he really emphasized.
Checking our note. We've taken a lot of notes these last few days.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, I feel like this just goes on forever.
We may be working on a book.
We'll see. But the LaDell's defense opening statement really emphasized control, domination, and isolation. And those were three words that his defense just kept repeating and repeating and repeating. And I didn't know what the connection really was. I never feel like he made that connection of like
how, and whose control.
Whose control,
whose
domination,
poor LaDell.
Yeah.
Was he the one, or was it the women who were being pushed around by all these men?
So I don't know. And just power, sex, and money is what it's all about. And it didn't tell a story.
Nothing. Yeah. And again, over, just the weird part of so many weird parts of this trial. But you've got these two brothers who helped Sam Bateman very much. Sam's not in the court. He may be called as a witness, but he's not there. But let me tell you, his shadow hangs over everything.
Absolutely.
Because somebody said, I think, in one of the court documents, that none of these crimes would have been committed by any of these people had it not been for Sam Bateman.
Well, Worth talked about that when we spoke to him.
I think that's probably true, yes. And so, he was the instigator of all this, but the willingness of some of these people to sign on, for their own lustful, greedy, selfish, weird religious needs. And this is why, so Sam Bateman hangs over all of this. Warren Jeffs and the FLDS referred to throughout the trial.
Yeah.
And again, it's sort of interesting to hear people who don't know much about the story trying to explain to people who know nothing about the story. And this is, I think, one of the hardships that the two defense teams, I don't think they really understand what all this is about.
No, but Torrance's defense did understand that he's a deeply religious man, obsessed with getting into heaven, just devoted to God.
There were a lot of just questionable things about the statement, but for Torrance's attorney, the first thing out of her mouth was, he's a religious fanatic. Mm-hmm. That's what she says to the jury.
And he's a product of his environment, and that underage brides are not part of the FLDS that he follows.
And she also said that Sam never hung out with Torrance, which is...
No, Torrance never hung out with Sam.
Yeah, Torrance never hung out, which is...
And didn't know.
Counter to what we experienced, because Torrance was with Sam.
You can single-handedly debunk that. But...
Yeah. All right. So the opening statements, I think the state, just because they have the way best hand and did a pretty good job of putting it together.
Yeah.
They were very strong. The defenses... if I was Torrance and LaDell, I'd be more worried now than I was before the statements.
Yeah, definitely. Especially because, like I said, the prosecutors, I think, really put it in context too. Overall, and talked about.
It was a narrative.
It was a narrative,
crime spree narrative,
and this religion in general.
Yeah.
It did a pretty good overview of that.
Yeah.
And we also got a really good overview today with the very first witness that was called. she just laid the groundwork that I think the jury really needs to hear to understand this religion, the way these people's minds work, and like how they really do just put all of their faith and every decision ever to be made in their life in the hands of one person that's not themselves.
Prophet.
The prophet. So yeah, the first witness today was Julia Johnson, and she was Moroni's wife.
Yeah, this
first
is
wife.
again getting in the weeds. This woman her husband started giving her all of his wives and daughters over to Bateman. She was among that group. Never really wanted to get involved, but she's probably a woman. I would say that she had children in their 20s, so she's got to be.
She called a woman in her 30s a young woman.
Okay, so
maybe
she looks a lot younger than I do, so it's hard for me. I'm guessing
40s,
she's got to be 40 or something. But she, from the FLDS community, was part of one of these families that just started to get dismantled by Sam, and she was one of the adults to really say this is wrong. Watched her daughters being given
and spoke out about it and was punished for it
and rebuked. But she's again the product of this world, and until she finally broke, didn't really know what to do or where to go. Julia was an amazingly powerful witness.
Absolutely.
Because she laid out for this jury basically FLDS tradition, culture, and history 101 in a very succinct way, and sort of established the dynamics of men and women in that society.
Men and women and the prophet.
Yes, and there you go.
There is no relationship between man or woman without the prophet.
And we talk about so much of the abuse of women. This Sam Bateman's case is rife, full of sexual abuse of men. I mean, Sam really was one of those omnivore predators. He'll screw,
whatever.
He'll screw anything, and it comes out in this. And boy, I've covered a lot of these guys, and Sam really is about as twisted as any of the prophets, and I've covered a dozen of them, more than that. This is LeBaron kind of crazy, and he started talking about blood atonement, and how if it would have gone.
And putting Moroni into positions so that he didn't specifically say the blood atonement, but to put him in vulnerable positions so that Sam could do something.
Yeah, Julia was saying
towards the end of her time,
where she was married to Moroni at one point, and Sam wanted to kill him, and so Sam's trying to get Julia to get Moroni into some position where he could be blood atoned.
Yeah.
That people talk about that. It has happened only in a handful of the groups, and I don't believe it would have happened with Sammy. But who knows? This guy really is off his rocker.
Yeah.
And the more we know about what was going on in his toxic soul, and just this lust to just going after younger and younger children, and then getting group sex. He just got pervier and pervier. With every month with this. And again, the clock was ticking, and my biggest concern about this, I have yet to see any real sense of urgency on the part of law enforcement. They sort of got dumb lucked into this case. And I'm hoping that I learned that the FBI was up to their eyeballs in this investigation prior to Sam being pulled over in Flagstaff, which was just a dumb, stupid mistake. Serendipitous. And the only real hero that I can identify in this story at this point, prosecutors are doing a good job, but there's only one hero, that heads-up motorist who observed the little finger sticking out.
Holding the trailer door closed.
Because if that person hadn't called the cops in Flagstaff, who did a good job on the scene, but if that person hadn't called the cops, I don't know if the FBI ever would have done anything with this.
Didn't sound like they ever had enough evidence, no matter what they had.
And that points up the thing that it really sort of has torn at my gut for 2.5 years. As soon as I had my interaction with Sam, I notified the FBI, and I said, I have photographic and video evidence of this man who I know through source. I know you guys are investigating. You don't have to confirm it to me, but I have video and photos of the guy, probably all of his adult co-conspirators, and most of his victims.
He called them his ladies, so that's just a reference.
I mean, there was as soon as I saw that, I knew I was in a crime scene, and was sort of stunned because I didn't expect this guy was going to show up with the women. I wanted to tackle the guy and then call 911 and then make a risk an assault charge just to get him on the radar of cops at the moment. But I held back, and I'm sorry about that. But we offered the FBI video at 2 different occasions over the 8 months leading before his, and they wanted to come see it, and they never did. Tomorrow they're going to introduce a witness who provided video inside, but it doesn't sound like, I don't know when that came. We're just anxious to see a timeline that tells us that the FBI, because they were notified, law enforcement first became notified in early 2020,
I believe.
So 2 years passed with more than one person with some link to the story saying do something, and it took a random act of a motorist seeing those fingers to bring Sam to justice. I'm hoping that the FBI shows more, that they were doing more than that.
Yeah, well, I feel like we've started to get the timeline. Like Julia laid out a pretty decent amount of the timeline, but I think, yeah, we need to still fill in the gaps to be able to fully make our judgment on that. But right now it does seem a little bit suspicious, like when people actually were acting on
this. And honestly, we've been pushing it for the last 4 years, and I spent 45 years of my life pushing for guys like Sam to be prosecuted. And when he dumped his crimes in my lap, I thought this is going to be an easy slam dunk.
Yeah.
And it's taken all this time, and kids were sexually abused as those months ticked away. I'm hoping that we see that this is a stellar example of law enforcement on the job. Even if that traffic stop had not happened, they were going to get Sam. I hope I learned that.
Yeah. Well, they definitely had plenty to get him on, it seems like, because, I mean, they're just going through some of the messages. They're talking about him.
But they got all those messages after they raided the home.
No, I know.
And they raided the home.
They're checking on the kids before that. Like, they were trying to shuffle kids back and forth between the houses, keeping them away from DPS before that. So, like, there was interactions. There was that time.
Oh, DP.
There was the time.
What do they call it? DCS here? You used to call it CPS when I was doing the job.
DPS is not.
Now it's DCS, which is the Department of Child Services. Those guys apparently were onto them at least twice before the pullover. We find out that there was another traffic stop in Cedar City with Sam and many of his ladies.
Isn't that the one he took the selfie in the back of the car?
He took a photograph of himself. Sam was basically pulling over, coming to media, inviting film crews into his home. I have written about this. I don't think there was ever an easier target in the history of this story for law enforcement than Sam Bateman.
Nope.
And again, I just don't understand why it took more than at least 2 full years with people sounding the alarm for anybody to do something. And in the end, they didn't do anything. It was the motorist that called in the little fingers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Forgive me, I'm a skeptic that I am, and I've fought much of my career again to bring guys like this to justice, and have sometimes had to go out and find them ourselves, pull them into the spotlight, and say, law enforcement, what are you going to do? A lot of the stories have been like that, and I'm not sure that we shouldn't have done that when we first encountered Sam.
Well, now we're doing it. And we've been, I feel like, just sounding the alarm on Sam as much as we have been able to.
Yes, it's frustrating.
Whoever is listening.
It is frustrating, though. It's frustrating, yes. I think, for us, and as we've covered this story.
Yes, but, like, it gets better one child at a time. And
Thank you, Flora Jessup.
Yes, there are kids that have gotten out.
And that's the only thing that really matters in this. Those children that Sam was abusing, as far as we know, are in pretty good hands now.
Yeah.
We're doing well. That really, all this other is in the weeds. Calling balls and fouls here, but the kids are out, and that's really the only thing that we wanted to see when we got involved in this. And that Sammy and some of his cohorts, including some of the women, which is sort of unprecedented, the men and the women and Sammy are going to go and do some serious prison time.
Yeah, face the consequences for their actions.
Isn't that what worth?
That's called justice, I believe.
Yeah.
But
slow.
Few and far between these days. But then we got to the cross-examination today.
Yes.
After the prosecutor went through all of that. So yeah, the cross-examination it started off, I mean, fine. He was, laying some groundwork and asking questions here and there, but I didn't really feel like it ever had a point. It just kind of seemed random. There was a lot of objections.
By that point, Julia had really laid out a case against all these guys, the history.
And most of the questions she had already answered.
Yeah.
But then it kind of got a little hostile and a little testy, and
Well, what is a defense going to do in a case like that?
You gotta go after their
She
character.
drops the dime on him, and she's this sweet woman. Is talking in this soft, calm voice, and the only thing they really could do is try to rough her up and say, "Well, why didn't you do more? Why did you participate?"
You just let your
And
daughters go to him.
yeah, and all valid questions, all valid questions. But yeah, I think the jury saw that. You got to be careful because this woman has gone through the history of sort of misogynistic abuse, and the defense lawyer has to be delicate with that, and I don't know if he was that delicate.
No, because they didn't get the context, and the
Yeah.
prosecutor gets the context and laid the context out,
right.
which paints her in not that she's completely like wash her hands of this situation, but
I think she was torn and agonized through this whole period.
I
to
do
be
too, but
putting
you also
through
have to
all of that.
understand growing up in something like the
Yes.
FLDS is not like growing up a normal child. Like that's not the same thing. And you do have to understand that coming
Totally.
into this, and it's not defending what these people do whatsoever, because like we've said before, child abuse is black and white, and that is never okay. But
Right.
to understand it's not brainwashing. I don't want to say that because that's such a negative, and I'm not trying to be judgmental.
But I don't. I think in this case,
the dismantling of like their trust in themselves to make decisions,
and when
through overtime.
you hear about all of this, the tutor, the constant teaching the men were giving, it is brainwashing.
Yes,
listening to the sermons of Warren Jeffs nonstop in the caretaking homes that exist today in the FLDS side of this. I mean, kids are just completely isolated with the drumbeat of Warren and these patriarchal men telling them what to do.
The voice in your head is no longer your voice. It's Warren. It's the prophets.
Yeah.
It's what would Warren tell me to do?
I don't think brainwashing is really too strong.
I just didn't want to be mean.
You're nicer than
I don't know. I'm not trying to justify any of this either, though.
Yeah, I know.
It's just, I don't know. I just understand the religious cult like aspect of this.
Yeah, well.
So
and that sensitivity is important.
But yeah, so the prosecutor understood that, and the defense did not, and really kind of went after her. And yeah, towards the end, it just kind of went off the rails. It didn't seem like he had a close to his questions.
Just sort of we're done.
Yeah, the judge was just like, "Are you gonna ask the final question?" He's like, "Give me a second." She's like, "No, like you got to do it now or never." Yeah, and then he's like, "Oh, I don't have any more." Yeah, so yeah. That's how the day ended.
Yeah, so that Torrance's defense attorney up tomorrow to do some cross. We're hoping for that at least be an interesting exchange. Yeah. And we're going to stay with this. Again, we're invested to see this to the end.
Yeah, we're gonna try to be better about posting little daily clips.
Yeah, I'm writing some stuff on my Facebook. If anybody follows that kind of stuff, essays and dispatches. And Dylan and I are trying to make sure that we're going to put something on social media, the other social media throughout the trial.
Yes, but that is the up-to-datest, if you will.
Greatest, latest, up-to-datest.
Greatest, latest, up-to-datest on day 1 and day 2 of this trial. It's supposed to last 5 weeks. Yeah. 4 days a week. So we will keep you posted every couple days on new things we think you should know. Right. And like and subscribe, share with your friends.
And we've had some new subscribers. And
yes,
we want to welcome them and think that we really appreciate it. And I think a lot of we're growing some because people are interested in this story.
Yeah, and so we just want to talk about it because we feel like if we talk about it, then the abusers feel the heat and they don't abuse as many kids. So the more people talk about it, the better. And we appreciate all the help you guys can give us. So like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm Dylan.
Mike.
Good night, everyone.